Alright, so while my first video is processing, I have to come at this different. So, today it was confirmed that Connor McDavid got 8 years, $100 million. $12.5 million a year, smaller than the $13.25 million he was projected to get. Now, much has been made about Connor McDavid's being selfish, Connor McDavid's asking for too much money, Connor McDavid shouldn't make more than the maximum, which is $10.5 million. The maximum above which everybody else has measured being Kane, Taves, and now Carey Price. On today's marketplace, I have little doubt that Sidney Crosby would get a hell of a lot more money than he's making right now. Crosby signed that contract when the salary cap was low. $8.7 million is a nice number for Crosby. I remember he didn't take league max. As I remember it, he didn't take league max. And $8.7 million works because he's number 87. And then Malkin came up and he took more money because the cap had gone higher. Now, the thing with McDavid is this. The contract's not that bad. And the fact that it came down off what it was initially, and the fact that it took a few extra days, I have a feeling, and this is just conjecture on my part, I have a feeling that Peter Chiarelli looked at Draisaitl's asking price, may have gone back to McDavid and said, all right, I may need to move a little bit more money around here and talk to him down to 12.5. So that Draisaitl gets the amount he wants. Because if Kuznetsov's worth 7.8, and that's where the marketplace is, then Draisaitl's worth more than Kuznetsov right now. This is part of the reason why when I see these young kids getting these big contracts, there's a part of me that kind of does a double take, because in my mind you have your 3 years, you have your bridge contract, and then at 5 years you have a really good idea of what you're getting in a player, whether he's going to be a superstar, whether he's going to be a star player, or whether he's going to be average. And Draisaitl had a fantastic season, but there's no telling whether he's going to keep getting better, if he's going to stay the same, or if this was a career year and he's going to regress. And nobody knows that. Draisaitl doesn't know that right now. Or worse yet, Chiarelli doesn't know that. But he has to negotiate with Draisaitl on the idea that the output he had this year is just the beginning. So, McDavid being at 12.5, honestly, is he worth $2 million more a year than Taves or Kane? Absolutely. Is it selfish? Maybe. But I don't see many contracts that I don't look at and say, well, he probably could have taken less money. Because almost any of them could have taken less money. I'm sure they could have sat with the GM, looked at the contract and said, that's a little high for me, I think. Why don't you go ahead and take $1 million off of that? Because I want to be fair. That doesn't happen very often. Very, very rare that a player is going to say, hey, I want to be fair to the team, here's the amount that I want, and a GM goes, all right, and jumps at it. It does happen. Not a lot. I think there were Oilers fans who figured that McDavid would take a hometown discount to stay with the Oilers long term. Those, again, are overblown and they're rare. There's not a whole lot of guys in the NHL that you can look at and say, taking a hometown discount, except for veterans. Veterans will often take a discount to go home. And that's why I mentioned guys like Iginla. I mentioned Jágr. I could see Iginla going back to Calgary. I could see Jágr going back to Pittsburgh and playing secondary roles, playing mentor roles, playing sheltered minutes for less money. And then transitioning into a management phase later on. As much as we all take Jágr at face value that he'll play till he's 50, there has to be a team that'll take him till he's 50. And the fact that he wasn't snapped up on July 1st says he may not have the demand that he wants. When he said no GM was calling him, I don't think he was being honest. I think it was done for a joke and jest. But I do think that the demand for him has dropped from what it was. And of course it has. He's 45. So, and there's been suggestions of what if the Oilers picked him up. That'd be great. Honestly. Yes, the game is going towards speed and youth. Yes. And that's part of the reason why Jágr doesn't have a contract. But Guys like Yager and Doan and Iginla, they can be used as mentors to the younger players. What about a Shane Doan going to Pittsburgh and playing sheltered minutes? Again, it's not about playing them top 6 and playing them 16, 17 minutes a night. What McDavid has done by taking $12.5 million, instead of the 14 he could have taken, he's left that $1.5 million there to make that kind of a move. It's up to a GM to be able to make it work, not the player. So when Kuznetsov sat down and apparently put a gun to McClellan's head and said, "Hey, I'm taking $7.8 million," or somewhere in that range, and maybe McClellan talked about it a little bit, but he said, "I'm getting the kind of money I want, or I'm going home." McDavid didn't do that. McDavid negotiated. He was staying in Edmonton no matter what. So I don't see that same greed that other people see. I just see a guy making the money he's supposed to. When I see a guy in basketball that has achieved not a whole lot in the playoffs, and he's getting a 3-year contract for $100 million, are you kidding? I looked at that and I'm like, I don't care what kind of money there is in basketball. That's ridiculous. And I know it's worse in European football, called soccer over here. I know. So when I see the kind of money being thrown around in the NHL, I don't think it's that outrageous. You look at guys in basketball, you look at guys in baseball, you look at guys in like between football, basketball, baseball, there's all kinds of guys getting paid tens of millions of dollars who aren't nearly as good for their sport as McDavid is for the NHL. And the NHL and the Players Association are supposed to be working together to help increase revenues. And for whatever reason, they don't do a good job of it. And I've done plenty of videos where I've talked about it. The job they do in promoting the league and promoting the stars in the league, it's lacking. And coming out of that big lockout when they decided to go to OLN, the NHL signed with the Outdoor Life Network for their hockey games. Oh, we understand there's like 4 homes that have it, but you should have seen the money they threw at us. ESPN wasn't offering us that kind of money. Right, but ESPN was in every home. The NHL's never recovered from that. And that's one of those things where the Players Association should have a say in it, because it directly affects their wages. It's great to have a big TV contract. You're never going to get an NHL TV contract like the NFL has, Major League Baseball has, or an NBA has. The NBA didn't have that kind of contract 30 years ago. And Major League Baseball, coming out of their last strike, I don't believe their contract was great either. Because attendance was down, fan interest was down, because they kept going on strike. They kept having lockouts. And the NHL needs to straighten it out. And it's not McDavid's job to do it. McDavid's contract, if the NHL and the NHLPA do their job, that contract is a bargain 4 years from now. 4 years from now, we're talking about how McDavid's making $12.5 million, and Matthews in Toronto's making $14 million, and what a good guy McDavid is for being at $12.5 million and being happy, while Matthews makes $14 million and maybe Lane's making $15 million. Like, the numbers should keep going up. They should. And you look at the money that's going around in the other big leagues, and I'm sorry, hockey players, in terms of being physically fit, they're in the best shape that any hockey players have ever been in. Connor McDavid is a machine. Same as Sidney Crosby was, same as Malkin. Players today are in shape 365 days a year. There is no downtime anymore for players. Because that player that takes the summer off and maybe lounges around a bit and enjoys himself, he's Kyle Wellwood. He's Phil Kessel. He's coming to camp a little pudgy and immediately is outed as being out of shape, not intense, not a hard worker. All of these things start coming out. There's a lot of pressure on players now, and they are in peak condition at all times for that reason. And they deserve the money. So I'm not going to say, oh, Connor McDavid should have taken a $10 million contract to help the Oilers with the cap. That's not his job. Just like it's not Draisaitl's job to look and go, well, I better take $6 million or else the Oilers are going to have a hard time. That's not Draisaitl's job either. That's Chiarelli's job. So when I see people saying, well, Carey Price took so much money in Montreal, he won't be able to put a team in front of him. It's one $10.5 million contract. Chicago has 2 of them and has won 3 Stanley Cups. with that kind of contract on their roster. So Montreal can't do it with one? Sure they can. It's up to Mark Bergevin to make it work. So Chiarelli, make it work. I'm not an Oilers fan, but I do believe that with Connor McDavid, the Edmonton Oilers are going to win a Stanley Cup. And if a single Stanley Cup gets won by Edmonton, any and all complaints about the money McDavid makes disappears on the spot. I know, because I remember when people were talking about Crosby and Malkin and the money they were making and how Pittsburgh would never be able to ice a roster around them either. Then the cap kept going up. Now it's not a problem. So the ball's in the NHL's court, the NHLPA's court. Work together, make it work, and McDavid's contract is an absolute steal 4 years from now. Come back to this video in 4 years, and if I'm wrong, I guess I owe everybody a Coke. I really hope this channel's bigger in 4 years, because that'll be a lot of Cokes. Anyways, thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.